Good afternoon, sorry, everyone. Thanks so much for coming along. We're just getting everyone in. You'll notice you've been muted for now. We will have time for questions. Please use the chat function as we go through our presentation today. And we'll be able to get to a lot of your questions later on, but it's great to see so many people coming in on this very sticky day, Sydney. We'll be starting in about 2 or 3 minutes. If you'd like to pop in the chat the country you're calling in from today, it'd be great to see the diversity of where everyone's from. I love seeing, how far a reach we have when we go on these webinars. It's really lovely to sort of see the lands that people are calling in from. Fabulous. Great to see so many people. All right, we did say that we would be prompt today, so keeping to our word, I'd like to introduce FAM CEO Susan Watson to begin our session today.
Thanks, Lauren. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see so many people interested in this sector conversation on the Common Assessment Tool. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of all the lands that we're dialing in from today. We pay thanks for the care of land, water, and seas that we now all get to enjoy, and for the wisdom and advocacy to change the child protection system for the benefit of not only Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, but for all children. I'd like to particularly acknowledge that the public holiday tomorrow will be a very difficult and confronting day for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues. The FAMS team stand in solidarity by not recognising this day as a celebratory one, but one of reflection and sorrow. When DCJ informed us about the Common Assessment Tool and the opportunity to utilise it in the TEAI programme, we jumped at the opportunity to take a deep dive into the tool with some service providers. A special welcome to our DCJ colleagues who will join us in the conversation. So let's get started. I'm really looking forward to hearing your views on how this tool may assist you and enhance your work with children and families. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks so much, Susan. It's a real pleasure to be with you all today on our first sector conversation for FAMS for 2024. I'm really thrilled to introduce our colleague from DCJ, Jess. And just hang tight while I scroll through so I can see you. Jess Rojas, is it? Yeah, beautiful. Who will be joining us to begin to talk through a little bit about the Common Assessment Tool and really share, I guess, a bit about what it is that has prompted DCJs to develop it and some of the hopes that they are wanting to gain from our sector taking it on board and utilising it with families. So thanks, Jeff. I'll get you to introduce yourself while I just sort out your tech for your presentation.
Thank you, Lauren. Can everyone hear me okay? I've had technical difficulties already. All good? Cool, I've got some nods. Before I begin, I'd also like to pay my respects to Aboriginal elders past, present, emerging, and especially any colleagues joining us online today. And I'm joining you from beautiful Bidjigal country today. And my name's Jess, and I'm acting manager for the Early Intervention Programs and Implementation team at DCJ. So just for a bit of context, our team looks after the BAU and program management of early intervention services, so mainly TEI and family connected support and a few other pilot projects along the way as well. And we work really closely with our sister team in evidence and strategy, who I see some members online today there as well. So just for a bit of background, really happy to be here today and thank FAMS for leading this session to talk about the Common Assessment Tool. This is something we're super proud of, and it took quite a bit of time and energy to get this into the making, so we're quite proud of what we've landed with. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with Family Connect and support, so I won't go into too much detail because I'm sure there's a lot of touch points across the sector that you work with them already. But essentially, it's an early intervention program, and it's delivered across New South Wales. It commenced in 2021, and during the first year of the program, there was some co-design work at the time to develop a common assessment framework, which is quite a key foundational document for the FCS program. And it provides a consistent approach across all Family Connected support services when assessing strengths and needs of children, families, and individuals. And just a side note, it also has quite a bit of broader applicability across other programs, and especially TEI services. So the practitioners, the FCS providers are like, great, we've got a lovely framework, but they were quite keen to have something a bit more tangible in terms of a shared approach, a shared tool that they could use to ensure kind of greater consistency across the program when doing assessments, intake and triage. So one of the key lessons that we learned when we developed the Common Assessment Framework was that cultural safety needs to be key in everything we do, and it needs to be at the front and centre of all our work, and not just a kind of add-on at a later point. So with that in mind, Karajo was selected to lead the design process for the Common Assessment Tool. And for those that don't know, Karajo is a majority Aboriginal owned and controlled professional services company, and they've got locally based office across New South Wales and ACT. And they were selected to lead the process because of their demonstrated strengths in working with families, Aboriginal communities and people. And the key for us was that their voices were quite key to the development of the Common Assessment Tool. So throughout the design process, Karajo worked really closely with all FCS providers. And I'm sorry, I refer to it as FCS. So if I go between it, it's just a natural for me to say FCS. They worked really closely with families and service users as well of the program, key stakeholders in the sector, and of course DCJ, and all that was to ensure that the final version of the tool was something that was really fit for purpose, flexible by design, and most importantly, incorporated the voices of the families that use the services. If we could just move on to a couple more slides, if that's okay. Yep, and the following on, yeah. So just one before, sorry, I just want to talk a little bit of what was involved in the entire process. So what was involved? Initially, Karajo conducted a desktop review. So they reviewed a whole bunch of standard assessment tools, evidence-based tools, and also looked at all the individual assessment tools that providers were at the time using, and all the tools and evidence that were analysed and kind of summarised into a report. They then developed a stakeholder engagement strategy. So they held multiple agency forums, broader stakeholder sessions, and there was a mix of face-to-face and virtual sessions. They also held a number of family consultations and interviews, so families that had worked with FCS and they wanted to know about their experiences to have that input into the design. So from all that information that they gathered, as well as their initial desktop review, they drafted a draft version of the Common Assessment Tool. And then that version was distributed to a whole bunch of stakeholders, key stakeholders, for further input and feedback. So obviously FCS providers were included in that, a whole breadth of DCJ people from all areas. So obviously head office, the districts were key as well, the Office of the Senior Practitioner. It was also sent to Child Wellbeing Unit and a few other key stakeholders as well. So then all that feedback was used to develop a user testing version of the tool, and that was trialed for just over a month period. And then another round of feedback was sought, and more family consultations. So Karajo then interviewed a number of families on their experiences after the tool had been used in their engagement with the service. And that was really key. And I think to point out here, half of all the families interviewed throughout the design process were Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. So that was really important for us. And so then Karajo handed over a final draft of the Common Assessment Tool to DCJ, and we continued to receive quite robust feedback. And as you can imagine, there was a lot of feedback to get through. So we spent quite a bit of time and energy going through it, and it pushed back our timeframes a bit, but we thought it was really important to carefully consider each piece of feedback we received and do as best as we could to incorporate it into the final version of the tool. And I'm pleased to say we actually managed to accommodate all the feedback, even kind of really contrasting parts as well. We managed to get through what we've developed to incorporate the bits that people said worked really well for some families and then didn't. And so we've kind of set out 3 different resources, which I'll show you in a little bit, to kind of really tailor it to the family that's in front of practitioners. And then along the way, another really important piece of feedback we kept hearing throughout from stakeholders when they were looking at the tool was that they felt it had applicability across other programs as well, so especially in regards to early intervention. And this is something we really kept front and centre in our minds when developing and finalising the tool, because although we had FCS program in mind when we embarked on the process of developing the Common Assessment tool, it really evolved over the project to ensure that we considered and incorporated other early intervention services and the way they worked and their needs as well, and especially TEI. So that TEI was a huge part of our planning and thinking. And moving forward, this is something that we're keen to explore some more and do some more work around as well. And just to kind of, another key piece that was really important in the process was the Aboriginal case management policy alignment. So we did a mapping exercise to ensure that especially the principle of Aboriginal family-led assessment was incorporated throughout the document. And this is really key for us because embedding the Aboriginal case management policy into all practices in early intervention is a priority for our teams. DEX, can't not mention DEX at some point. So I'm sure most of you would be familiar with score reporting in DEX. So another key piece of work we did was to do some mapping and ensure that the rating scale questions within the assessment tool, so the family self-assessment bit, that's been mapped to DEX to ensure compatibility. So there's potential in the future to use some of the rating scale questions as score questions in DEX. We also did a plain English edit, which was super important. So, you know, it wasn't just a government-y document that speaks not in the way we want it to come across. That the document has been developed for practitioners and families in mind. The graphic design and accessibility formatting was also key in that process because when we worked with designers, we had implementation in mind. We wanted the Common Assessment tool to be a tool that practitioners and families could both really engage with. Sorry, my computer's just frozen. There we go. And the next slide, sorry. Thanks, Lauren. Am I still there? I've just got a note saying I'm on stage. So this slide is just a quick overview of where we landed with the Common Assessment tool, and the final version looked very different to the user testing version. So what we've ended up with is the CAT guide, and that's kind of the master document that has everything in one. It's quite a lengthy document, and we received a lot of feedback initially that the initial tool was quite lengthy and wasn't user-friendly. So what we did, we've kind of separated and developed 2 templates. So the CAT guide contains all the information that practitioners need to know how to use the guide. There's a whole bunch of prompt questions, links to other documents as well. And then the next document, the practitioner joint assessment template, that's the actual template that practitioners do use with families. And the audience of that, we've changed the language around, and it's been written directly at families because we wanted them to know why we're asking things and how that information is going to be used as well. And then the final document is the family self-assessment template. And again, we wanted just to create a resource for practitioners when they work with families that they think the standalone self-assessment would help generate conversation or assist in practice, then that could be an option for them. That document will suit some families and individuals, but not all. And again, one of the key messages, which I'll also highlight in a bit, is that this tool has been designed to be flexible, and that's one of the key things we want practitioners to keep in mind when using the tool. So if we go to the next slide, I'll be super quick. Just some final key messages that we want practitioners to keep in mind when using the tool. Thank you. So the main takeaway really is that the tool is flexible. It doesn't need to be completed in any particular order or even in one go. The assessment conversation should be family-led, and families should be offered a copy of the tool always, because it's their information. They should have ownership of it. And the purpose of that, the middle template number 2, if they're offered a copy of their information, then they won't need to retell their story. If they get referred onto another service or at some point move on to another service, they can take that information with them, or if they have your permission, they can share it with another service as well. And so what I'm giving you is a super quick overview. I hope I haven't taken too long. The process of developing the CAT, like I said, it was quite robust and very lengthy, and I haven't gone into great detail, but one of the things I want to highlight is that we think it's a really good tool. We've put a lot of time and energy into it, and a lot of different stakeholders have as well. But we're more keen to hear what you think. Is this something that could be used in your programs? We think it has applicability across TEI services that conduct assessment, but we're really interested to know what you think. Could it be used in the current format? Does it need to have any tweaks to be more relevant for your services? What do you think works? What doesn't? I mean, I could go on. So again, really grateful that FAMS is hosting this conversation today, because it's a really important conversation, and I'm glad we're able to start it. I might just pause there and back to you, Lauren.
Right. Thank you so much, Jess. That was such a fabulous overview, and really appreciate you going through that process of exactly how it was developed. I think that's really interesting to us in the sector, because it gives you a real strength of faith that
I lost you.
No, we can hear you fine. We just can't see your face, that's all.
Oh, there we go.
I think it just gives the sector a real strength of trust that, that robust process has occurred, and it really helps us as practitioners know that, when you trial something, that that families have seen this and that it's going to be meaningful for them. And I love the idea that
sorry.
You right? Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, I love the idea that this potentially can be taken from service to service, that families have ownership of their knowledge. So that's really wonderful. So thank you so much, Jess. We'll bring you back on screen in a little bit. And I'll just like to introduce our colleagues who have been kind enough to actually kind of spend some time in their service thinking about how this might actually work for them and how it might be useful for them and their families. So I'd love to invite on screen Ligaya and Cherie. So Ligaya's from, sorry, I'm multitasking with the pin placement. Ligaya's from Casper up in Casino, a family service which FAMS has had some great contacts with and really keen to hear their perspective. And then Cherie, who is from Bernardo. So again, another family service who are quite different in terms of their size and the way that they work. And so I'm just trying to find you, Cherie, so that I can pop a nice pin on you so we can see your face. There you are. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have a bit of a conversation and kind of really try and get some sense of how this has been seen within their teams. There's even been at Casino, Casper's actually had a goal of utilising the tool. So it's going to be, we're going to just have a bit of a conversation to draw out some of the things that they think will be working well, some of the things that might be challenges, and then from that we'll lead into some questions that you can from the sector, where you can either ask DCJ or our colleagues who have had a go of the tool as well. So Ligaya and Cherie, thank you so much for coming today. We're so appreciative of your time and energy with this particular one. So it'd be great just to start off to hear from you both what your initial impressions were of the tool. So, just, high level, when you saw it, when you had a look at it, what were your initial impressions? And I'll leave it to you guys to choose who wants to start that part of the conversation.
Do you want me to start, Cherie?
Yeah, go for it,
Okay,
Ligaya.
then. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Ligaya, the Targeted Early Intervention Coordinator at Casper Family Supports in Casino in Gabagoo Land. I'd say what I found, I loved how it covered all the domains, and each page had a different domain, and it how to explain it. So going through the assessment, I went through with a couple of clients, and maybe they were willing to share more than most, but going through each page, they were like ready to open up. Okay, we'll go into this chapter and this chapter, so we'll go through the assessment together. And I found that the scores, because usually when you're doing scores, you sort of click that at the end of an assessment. And so doing it at the beginning and saying, how do you feel in the situation of one of the domains? And then that opens up a story. And I loved that. So that would combine everything together. And then you didn't have to worry about, oh, I've got to get the scores for Dex and I've got to do this and that. It all just tied in nicely. Yeah, and I found, it just naturally flowed. It is long. I found it does take probably double the time of a flat I would usually do. But in the past, it was just using a tick box. Okay, we've covered this, this, and this, and whether that would open up or not, you usually find out their story after a few sessions. This was more in depth, and they were actually more open to sharing more, just going through the pages. Yeah, I don't know what else to explain.
Right, that's a great start.
But yeah, Jess, it worked really well. Thank you.
What about for you, Cherie? What were your initial impressions when you saw the tool?
I think that this is exactly what we need in the TEI space across all the streams. It is very easy to implement in terms of that. I think we spoke about it, that relational intake assessment, conversation with families, and it's empowering as well. So it just has so many benefits in terms of, supporting families, children and young people in being a part of their case planning as well, the areas that are important for them, which really come out. And what look, this is 100% what's needed. We can utilize this. A lot of this is happening, but our across the board and quite generally, we're not capturing this at this level. So, the importance of this is significant. I think too, in conversations with about the tool, a lot of questions came up. Yep, we love it. It's fantastic. It's very, there's an ease to it. However, is this, is this going to be feeding into a bigger picture? If so, great. How does this look in terms of, uploads into Dex as an instrument, that a common assessment tool that we're using, and some questions around the instruments that are being used in the formulation of the question, in the design. We love it. We can't wait to be, for this to be rolled out across TEI. We will be using it. I think I mentioned earlier this week that this tool aligns with our own organisational outcomes framework, and the points of alignment and similarity are fantastic. So I know that this is going to work.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think it'd be really interesting to hear, how is it, like Cherie, you're saying it's very similar to what you're using. Ligaya, is it similar or different to what you're using currently? Like, how's it kind of contrasting to the tools that you're using at the moment?
It's different. The conversations would be similar, but this actually gives a guide. It's more, like I was saying before, we just have a tick box to cover various aspects, and we've talked about it. I think with this, what has helped, I think having the scores in each domain, asking about that just opens everything up. So yeah, they do actually, the stories do expand, and they do give more depth to them, because then they want to explain why they've, you know, chosen that. So it's really quite nice, actually. Yeah.
Right. Actually, really reflection, because some clients, when you do like an assessment, they'll want to talk you through, oh, well, I wasn't sure what to put for this one, but it's kind of like this. And so now you're able to capture that part of the story.
And then you sort of ask why, you know, why they do that. And sorry. Just
right.
I just wanted to add to that too. Lagaia, you really prompted me then with one of the standout differences from my perspective is the common assessment tool has more guidance and is more relational, where other frameworks that I've used are, you know, purely instrumental assessments.
It's more open, and and because it's not so structured on each page, that there can be, if the client doesn't feel quite comfortable, they'll avoid talking about things that might not be brought up, or, you know, you'll have to wait after a few sessions to actually hear what the real story is about. But if for some reason, I've only done 2 assessments, but for some reason they've been, you know, sitting there really excited, not excited, but really open to share their stories on each topic. Yeah.
Sure, can you talk more about that relational piece that you're picking up in the way that the tool's designed? Because I know, like, you know, from my perspective as a practitioner, I know what you mean. There was something about it that I went, you know what, this is almost grounding a conversation, and it's very structured, but it didn't feel overwhelming or something like that. Talk to me about that. What was your kind of opinions about that?
Yeah, so it felt like you're doing more of an activity with the client, not so much as an intake. If that's just trying to put that into words. I'm a bit lost, sorry. I'm not the best speaker at the moment. But it was it's just sort of, and that I'll stop that. Sorry, Lauren. Sorry, everyone.
Sure. What about for you? Why did it feel more relational? What were you kind of noticing that kind of stands out?
Well, I think in that space with the template provides prompts that give that guidance, but also one of the benefits of that is it is developing individual practitioners in their practice, because, you know, not everything's going to be scripted. You know, it's there as a guidance, but practitioners in that space grow confidence when they're working alongside families, children and young people to get a flow around those domains, around those areas that are captured within the assessment. So look, I think that in and of itself is brilliant, because a lot of practitioners do struggle with, I'm doing an intake or an assessment, and you know, I'm going to, as a part of your assessment process, the family self-assessment is a chance for you to do ABC. And immediately, if I were in that situation, coming in and, you know, for an intake, it would put me off, and I'm not going to engage in that process, or, you know, it'll be hard for me to engage with that particular practitioner. So it's a great professional development practice tool. as well.
Actually, I will cut it. Sorry, I sort of lost my train of thought before. I'm not the best speaker in the world, but after I did an assessment with using the tool yesterday afternoon, and when the mother went back home, she sent an email saying how much she appreciated it, and it was really nice to meet us. So just spending that couple of hours with her. And just sitting by and doing it together just definitely built some form of relationship there. To just get this email out of the blue thanking us.
It was nice to get an email to thank you for doing an assessment, isn't it? And I think that's the thing, is that, you know, for our newer colleagues who are, like, you know, learning how to do assessment, having something that's got some clarity, that kind of it creates safety. And it gives them to ask questions that are maybe a little bit unfamiliar, or, you know, maybe are harder to kind of bring up and unpack. And I think those prompts help with the unpacking. They might kind of go, you know, tell me about this bit, but not know how to do that next step of engagement and unpacking. Any challenges that you can see to the tool? Any things that, you know, didn't resonate with the way that your service works, or you think might need amendment or support in learning how to do delivery?
No, the length may be a challenge at times because it is quite in depth. But I think, I mean, not a lot of people won't be so complex, so you can miss certain sections of it. That's the main challenge I saw, because when I first printed it, I was like, oh my goodness.
So breaking the sessions might be important. I thought I worked with young people, so giving them autonomy about which part do you want to start with, because it actually doesn't matter. Like that kind of idea of like, like which bit feels comfortable, are you cool to chat with about? Felt really nice. What about for you, Cherie? Was there anything that felt like it didn't resonate, that you might need to change or amend? Or
no, I don't think so. I think what yourself and Ligaya have said is spot on, and it'll be around comfortability in you know, sitting with families with this common assessment tool, and I guess too that's there's no while it's great to have guidance around administering an assessment, or, you know, whatever terminology that you're going to use, there's no one way to do it, you know, and people will find with that guidance and with the ease that they'll develop their style in using this really great piece of work.
It's prescriptive and guiding, but I mean, sorry, it's guiding but not prescriptive. It's, you know, it's that kind of balance, isn't it?
Exactly.
And the guy, one thing that you raised the other day when we had that initial chat that I thought was really interesting, in terms of potentially some sector support needs, was just some potential training around the cultural and spiritual questions. I think it was you that raised it. It might have been. We have one colleague who has had to step out of today's session, unfortunately, because that's the nature of our work. Was it you that talked about that, or was it Eliza?
I think Eliza spoke about it around the cultural and spiritual aspects of the domains that sit in that. And after that conversation that we had, I went away and thought about it, and I was really interested in the underlying instruments in that, you know, where the how those questions, you know, are they coming from other scales? Are they based on other scales? But anyway, that's a question rather than.
Yeah, we can pop that one to Jess. And I think, you know, just to the wider sector, if you look at it and you kind of think, you know, we would love some support around how do we bring those cultural and spiritual questions, if they are a little bit unfamiliar, that's definitely something that we can look at supporting the sector around. So let us know, like, give us feedback as you kind of look at it, because it would be wonderful if everybody's level of comfort is able to be lifted in terms of talking about the cultural and the spiritual across our sector. I think that is such an essential component to doing a really thorough whole person psychosocial assessment when we're working with children, families and young people. How do you think, just probably one of our last questions before we move on to, you know, opening up to the rest of our people on the call today for questions, how would you use this, do you think, in terms of your treatment planning and case planning? And how might that be different to what you're already doing now? And I think, Cherie, that's a little bit speaking to what your team was saying about, you know, this is great, but how do we use it? What kind of ideas have you got at this stage? What's kind of coming to mind?
Oh, look, without taking away from individual practitioners and the excellent experience that they have, you know, supporting and walking alongside families, there's almost a structure around that guides, you know, planning alongside a family with specific needs that becomes quite clear when using an assessment like this. So it's really great to you know, once, you know, an area is identified, to be able to have that conversation, you know, that this looks like it's really important to you. And, you know, this is an area that we can work on. What do you know, so it's great. A great guidance. It gives structure to case planning, because sometimes that can be, people are so busy and they have, you know, multiple case plans and FAPs and whatever going on. So to have that, oh, that just stands out. That's a conversation I need to have, that we can have around how that feels for the family. Is this an area that, you know, that they've obviously identified, but, you know, would like to do some stuff around? Yeah, I think it's great. It makes our decision making easier and evidenced. You know, where that evidence base is something that's been lacking. And you know, like when push comes to shove, and sometimes it does, where we're making decisions alongside families, it's important that we're supporting families and we are also making the correct decisions.
Okay, what about for you? How do you see this informing treatment planning, case planning, the way to support?
Yeah, no, Cherie pretty much said it. It does, just because it's provides a framework at the beginning. It's easy to transfer into a case plan. It's yeah, it's all outlined, and having the discussions, you know, what the goals are, and you're talking about how to achieve them. So it all just naturally just transfers over. Yeah.
I was thinking as well, it would be a really interesting thing to pull back out later down the track, you know, like 3 months down the track, to sort of say, is there anything sort of, you know, because it's almost like one of those, you know, those wellbeing wheels where it's got those different domains of self and family, that you could kind of just have beautiful conversations around, you know, how is this different? Like I've got some ideas about how you do. What do you think? And what do you see? And, you know, if you do this today, how would you rate yourself? And being able to draw on that and really highlight change and capacity with families. I just think,
yeah, and looking at those little steps that they've achieved in that time, or, you know, for a lot of the clients, yeah, that would be nice. Yeah.
So just to kind of close our conversation, is there any sort of final thoughts, ideas, moments that you want to kind of speak to about your opportunity, the way that you were able to engage with families with this, or the way that you imagine engaging families with the tool?
For engaging, it actually was it was a surprise at how much yeah, it was for an introduction where everyone's cold, meeting each other for the intake assessment. It actually really does build that warmth for some reason just sharing that activity. So it is actually quite a nice thing to do. I don't know if it's the assessment, the coloured pictures and all of that. But it's yeah, it definitely strengthens the meeting from day one. Yeah, and having that clarity so everything can be in place for their supports, their service from you know, the assessment to the exiting, intake to exiting. It all starts on a solid foundations at the beginning, which is really nice. Yeah, that's what I found in the two that I did. Yeah. So.
Sure. Final comments or thoughts on the tool and implementation?
Oh, look, I agree, Lagaya. And you have been the service, the practitioner that has used this assessment. So yeah, I agree with what you've said.
Fabulous. Thank you both so much. That was so interesting. It was really wonderful to hear how you see this could be meaningful. I'm just going to invite Jess back up onto the call, and we might go through some questions. Some of them are luckily for you, Jess, and some of them are potentially for both of you, Lagaya and Cherie. I'm just going to make my way to the top of it and start pulling some out. So I'll start off with the first question up here, which is just, is the tool going to be made available online or as a PDF or a PDF form?
Yep, it is online. I think we've sent around the links before, and we purposely chose to leave the templates not as PDF because we needed to ensure accessibility for the documents, but we didn't want to limit how much practitioners could type in. If you do a PDF, we had to limit on the characters. So the guide is a PDF, that doesn't need to be changed, but the templates, they're meant to be typed into, so we had to leave them as a weird word format. I've never even seen that format before, but so it can be, you know, there's no limit on what you can input into that, and it keeps the format going. So it makes it longer the more you put in there. But yeah.
Great. Okay. The next question is, we're actually having a lot of comments of positivity, which is fabulous. One,
I was so nervous.
and just mention to you, and this is something that came up in our conversation prior to today's session about the benefits and the fact that people are time poor. And one comment that, you know, kind of was brought up was that potentially it could reduce the load for services by having commonalities across services. Is that one of the things that you're hoping for, Jess? Like, what sort of DCJ is thinking around that?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, when we started the planning process, we had FCS in mind, but as we kept going, we were like, well, FCS works across so many different services, and one of their key purposes is to refer out as well. So we wanted to reduce the amount of times that people needed to tell their stories and have more ownership of it. When we were kind of looking at the formatting, our dream was to have this version that's some sort of web-based product. We weren't able to land anywhere, and I don't think the system exists for something that can connect all services at the moment. So this is the best that we could come up with for now. But I mean, we explored a number of different formatting as well. Sorry, I forgot the other part of your question.
No, I think you answered it. I think it was just around that kind of sharing of knowledge. Like, there was the intention to have that knowledge transfer across the sector being able to happen to kind of reduce both practitioner, but also the load for families around retelling the story and having to have that, just even that process time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think many people have pointed out it is a long document, and we kind of looked at ways of streamlining it, but to make it a complete assessment, we needed each of the domains there, and they're not going to apply to all families, every single domain. And part of our messaging to FCS is to explore the domains that families are willing to explore. And even if it's not an issue for them or something, still explore it with them, because there could be a number of strengths there that it's important for families to highlight and kind of have on paper as the strength, and it's not just a kind of, we really wanted to move away from that deficit-based kind of assessment of just looking at needs and everything that's wrong kind of thing, and really celebrating the strengths within families as well.
And I think, this is the warmth that people are picking up on in the way that they're kind of engaging with their families as well. And I think one of the things that we were chatting with the crew on Monday about was that sometimes a time investment in this kind of really thorough assessment actually helps save time later down the track when you kind of go, oh, I had no idea that this was a concern for you, or that this was like actually a priority, and that actually by building that really strong foundational knowledge and relationship can sort of circumnavigate some of those challenges later down the track. But I think the time pressure that people can feel, I feel that, and I think being able to have that flexibility about what do we see as the domains, or what does the family see are the critical domains for this conversation at this point in time, and maybe we pick the other parts up 2 months down the track, 3 months down the track, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We do have a couple more questions. One here is this assessment practitioners an assessment that practitioners can utilise to measure change at different points during engagement?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that we've kind of kept in the back of the mind with aligning the questions in DEX as well. Family Connected Support reports a little bit differently in DEX than TEI. And so we're keeping in mind reporting as something to be measured and trying to streamline it as well, because we want to make things easier for providers in terms of reporting. But DEX seems to be a way that kind of quickly can show snapshots as well. So that's something that's, the capability is definitely there within the DEX system as well. Yeah, absolutely. But I like when you were talking before about looking back at a point in time and seeing, how far they've come from that as well. It sounds like a really beautiful exercise to do with families. Yeah.
A quick one here from Rebecca. Will the tool be translated into other languages?
That's definitely on our next steps as well. And when we put up final endorsement for the tool and things like that, that's something that we want to do in our next steps. And highlighting the most used languages is something that we're which is in our next phase of the development as well. But we wanted practitioners to use it first, and kind of not that, I mean, it is what it is, but we're not wedded to it. We want TEI providers to kind of really give their input as well. If this is something that we could adopt, when we worked with designers, we left it open that we could make tweaks to it if needed along the way, because it's important for us to get it right and to just make sure that it's actually working in practice as well. But definitely that's something that's on the radar, and especially the rating scales as well. When they're used with interpreters, we got some feedback that they don't always translate very well. So we're keen to kind of, in particular, have those translated properly. Yeah.
Fantastic. And just two final questions that almost have a bit of overlap here. The first one's from Maria, saying that DCJ has encouraged the use of the RACI common approach, and many of our colleagues have been trained in that. How do the two frameworks work together, and should TEI programs preference the common assessment tool over a RACI's tool?
Yeah, that's a really good question. This is one of the tools that was looked at when Karaja did their initial desktop review as well. So they reviewed a whole heap of different evidence-based tools, and they wanted something that was quite custom to the work that's done in the early intervention space. That's a good question. In terms of our messaging at the moment, I mean, this tool's been developed for FCS, but again, we're keen to have these conversations with the sector about how appropriate and useful it is for TEI, and then we'll look at next steps forward about applicability across the services. Definitely, yeah. So we'll let you know.
Yeah, I think everyone, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. This is initial stages.
Yeah.
Great to get people's curiosity piqued, and we're just keen to keep talking and learning about how this could work for families. Final question to you, Jess. How will various agencies share the assessment tool with each other? For example, if a service who has completed the assessment tool has a family and refers the family to my agency, what would that look like?
great question. And takes me back to my practitioner days. Obviously, everything's always best practice is to have consent of families. Early intervention is all voluntary as well. So unless it ever tips over to child protection, then it's best practice to have family consent. You shouldn't be sharing information without their consent. I would ask families. I would ask them if they want me to share it on their behalf, if they want to share it. And I guess that's part of our messaging about offering a copy to the families, because then they have control over that document themselves, and they're able to share it with whoever they like or not. That's also their, up to them, but flexible. Like if families say, yeah, please send it to a service, I'm sure that's happened on occasions as well. That's current practice, as you would normally. Yeah.
Right. I'm mindful of time, so I might call the questions here. If people have further questions, though, please email me directly. I'm happy to consolidate them, and we can put documents out to the sector or whatever kind of useful thing we can kind of, whether, it might be about having another session down the track as well. So thank you so much, Jess, Cherie, and Ligaya as well for jumping on today. We're going to just do one final thing before we wrap up today's session. So I'll ask you if you could grab your phones out or just open another screen on your desktop, because we're just going to do a quick Menti check-in to see how people are feeling and what sort of needs or thoughts they might have around implementation and next steps. So if you jump onto Menti, and so you can go into menti.com and then just type in the code so you can connect. Give me a little thumbs up once you've done that so that I can see that we've got most people in there. And the first question for today is, following today's session, would you be interested in looking at using the Common Assessment tool in your service? So very kind of broad question and quite broad scale. So it's, yes, it's a pretty big improvement on what we currently have. Maybe we really need to see how it would work for our service itself. Or no, we've got something that's actually working quite well and pretty keen to stick with that. So if you can take a minute just to pop your rating in, that would be really wonderful. And they're kind of coming in live, so you can live see people's thoughts. Don't stress if your tech takes a few minutes. We can catch you up at any point. It's all okay. Fantastic. So it's a pretty solid split so far between a yes and a we just need to have a bit more of a think, which is really positive. Especially something that's so fresh and so new that you might have only just had a look at in the last few hours. Fantastic. I'll give people just maybe a minute or so. Don't stress if you don't get to this question quite in time. You should be able to give an answer regardless, and we'll kind of put this information back into the sector in a follow-up as well, so that you can see what your colleagues and peers are thinking as well. So at the moment, we've got 14 saying that, yes, it's a vast improvement, we're keen. And we've got another 8 who are pretty keen to consider it, but they've just, got some reservations, really need to kind of think it through. That's great. Thank you so much, everyone who's contributed to that. I will move on to the next question, which is, what assessment tools are you currently using? So this is a text box one. Just type in, is it an internal document that you've developed? Is it, like my previous organisation, we used the HEADS assessment, which is a great tool, but it's really mental health focused. It's not family focused, and it was kind of clunky and didn't always fit. So curious to see what you use in your service. Right. Some commonality, which is really interesting. Okay, some internal ones. Strengths and stresses is another common one. The DAWS assessment. Parents under pressure. So lots of internal documents, which is interesting. And I think that one of the things that in our conversation on Monday that we had to prep for today, people were quite quite keen to have some common language across the sector, which I think would be really lovely if we're starting to talk about, you know, these things, if we're starting to always bring, you know, a whole person assessment into the way that we as a whole sector are thinking about children, families, and young people. That would be a really lovely kind of change. So PWI, great. And the SDQ, fantastic. Okay, so we've got some overlaps of people are tending towards those sort of strengths-based assessments already, which is wonderful to see. Oh, and the ORS and SRS, classic, love that one. It's a really great tool. All right, I'll move on to our final question, please. If you haven't typed yours in yet, please type it in. It's we can kind of keep going and consolidate that as well. And the final question for today is, would you be interested in being in an implementation working group where we could kind of gather together and think about how we do this well, how we, you know, support each other out around our learning. There might be parts of our sector find more challenging. There might be parts that people feel really confident. I'm really curious about how this might support onboarding and early career practitioners as well, and how we might kind of build that into the way that we engage with our practitioners to feel really confident about having these conversations. So yeah, great to see. If we have a solid interest in this, this will be something that we will absolutely follow up about in the future. Right, so we've got some keen people, which is great, some people who, you know, unsure, might need to see what the actual agenda is and how that might be useful for them before they commit their time. I completely appreciate that. I'll give people one more minute. And what I'll be doing is I'll be sending out a recording to all of the people who registered today, because we do know that some people weren't able to make it last minute. And we will follow up with an email as well. So if you are one of the people who are saying yes, any sort of next steps we'll be able to connect you with as well. Fantastic. So on that note, I will start to wind up today's session. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the call. Particular thanks to Jess, Cherie, and Ligaya as well for sharing with us about their knowledge and experience of the tool as well. We will be in touch to talk more about how we might be able to support the sector and next steps as well. And that video recording will come out in sort of the next few hours as well. So if you have colleagues that couldn't make it, didn't know about it, please feel free to forward that along. But in the meantime, don't be a stranger. Always happy to hear from you. Please email me questions, thoughts, comments. It'd be wonderful to really start a conversation of how we can make this useful for the TEF sector. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. See you all soon.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
Thank you.